Hi, my name is King Sakile Prosecutum Tembu, and I come to you today with the second installment of my titled video called The Islam Religion and its Caliphate Entourage. So the last time I stopped by where I was telling you about the Islam's plans on fighting against the two governing systems, which is democracy and by default also fighting against communism, seeing that communism exists because of the platform democracy allows it to exist on. Okay, so I stopped briefly, abruptly rather, where I was explaining, or where I just mentioned how Islam is planning to go off grid and Islam is planning to plant the caliphate. All right. So now, with that being said, with the colony of Islam coming along, or rather, the colony of the caliphate planning its colony under the mask of Islam, we start to realize that the true notions of this mask of Islam is not actually even true to itself. So which brings about the question, the bigger question as to, when I asked earlier on in my first video, as to say, are all Muslims under this Islam religion for the caliphate? So with the next points that I'm about to bring, I think the three populations actually that should be paying close attention are members of the Muslim religion, number one. Number two, governors who apply communism and governors who apply democracy as well. So, moving on. The world is connected by cell phones. Let's not undermine the negative influence of poor service quality amongst majority of black people because of Islam indoctrination against the lack of service delivery by democracies. And these democracies are in English and by international mandate. Okay, so and with these democracies being in English, okay, in this non-democratic world of Islam, what replaces English? Okay, so now this is a very profound question to ask, especially where democracy is concerned. All right, the pillars of democracy are based on the pillars of Christianity. And when you look at democracy and Christianity, and you look at the language dialects that come along with it, you start to realize that Islam is against all languages that are written primarily by the Greek, Latin, English alphabet. So you'll find all the languages that are written with this alphabet suffer against the indoctrination of Islam. So what Islam does is, as I told you guys earlier on, if you are in Islam, you need to completely forget the English alphabet, because the Muslim religion and the Quran is not taught in the dialects of this English alphabet. All right, and if this English alphabet is what represents democracy in the legislative context, then we do realize that Islam is fighting the legislature, and it is fighting the constitution of the legislature as well, because that same constitution is in the alphabets that are used in the English alphabet of democracy. So as I said earlier on, what is the constitution of Islam? The constitution of Islam in this context is the Quran. And you ask yourself, how is the Quran the government? Exactly the same way. Well, I'm assuming now in this context, if you were to ask someone who is deeply lobbying the caliphate as the new colony that is fighting democratic colonies of the British colonies, of the French colonies, of the Portuguese colonies, and so forth. If you were to ask them and say, how is the Quran, the constitution of the Islam governments, they will ask you the same question as to how is Christianity the constitution of democracy. Right. We get the source from the dialect origins of the Taliban flag, which is of the Islam religion. As I mentioned earlier on, the militant Taliban is taking on the army of the Islam religion, which brings us to what I call the MPE, which I take from 2001 9/11. Right, now you're probably asking yourself, what is MPE? This is a term that your king has decided to create in order to make things easier in this political age. So when we go to the religious manuscripts, we have what BC, and BC is what we call when we now using historical reference. BC is what would stand for before Christ, and then we have AC, and then that is what we know as after Christ. And then as time went by, we had BCE, and then we had ACE. BCE, just so to encompass all religions, and it's not to say that we are necessarily dictating the calendar according to the Christian calendar, but we say before Common Era, all right? And then with ACE, we say after Common Era, whereas before we would say before Christ, and we would say after Christ. So as not to say that we are being dictative as democracies with the religion of Christianity, we altered it and we called it BCE, which is before Common Era, and which stands for before Christ. And then we altered it as well to ACE, which is from after Christ to after Common Era. Now we move on to a new age where there is a direct attack on the systematical calendars of the world, of world religions. Right. And it seems as though Islam is attacking those systematical calendars of world religions, including the very recent Mayan calendar system. All right. And the Jewish calendar system as well. So one could ask themselves if whether the Jewish calendar system is in cahoots with this new lobby of the caliphate by the Islam. That is now a bigger question. So now moving on to what I called the MPE. That is now a term I coined the modern political era. And the modern political era starts from 2001 on 9/11. So it is because of these politics from 2001, 9/11, that we are here. And, as much as I would like to give patriotic give a patriotic salutation to America and the way it has been administrating this Cold War, this on and off Cold War that is brought about by intervals, by the changing of American presidents. I'd say not, because of mainly COVID-19. And it seems as though COVID-19 and its lockdown was very much in favor to the Islam and to the communists, and also to the caliphate as well. All right. So this MPE stands for modern political era. Now, with this coined term being in place now, each and every single thing that I have said from the very first video that I published up until now is based on this MPE. And each and every single thing that is happening around the world in terms of politically owes its existence to the foundation of the politics that were lobbied in 2001, 9/11. Now, the connection here is the invasion of the USA troops in Afghanistan in the hopes of finding nuclear weapons that were said to be found, but instead what was found is oil. Interesting. So now as we move on, we had conspiracy theorists who were claiming that is there a possibility that the USA attacked itself in order to lobby an invasion for oil in the favor of drill bits? These conspiracy theories have been going on for quite a while. But I am here to disprove those theories today because of the Middle East politics that are happening and the Central African Al-Qaeda politics that are currently taking place now. All right, let's move on. From 9/11, it seems the males of the Islam religion have been building, and they have been building hard. Here included in this building, in this colonization, in this colony of the caliphate are offshore accounts of Eastern drill bits and Islam drill bits and caliphate drill bits and colonizers and lobbyists as well, which by the nature of these offshore accounts includes the tyrannical leaders of the communist regimes, okay, such as Vladimir Putin, Xi Jinping of China, and by constitutional corruption, Cyril Ramaphosa. Okay. These colonizers and lobbyists are colonizing the African continent, and the African continent and the African mind with Eastern propaganda. This is what award-winning journalist Shireen Abu Akleh was assassinated for. The coverage of the profound coverage of journalists into this Eastern propaganda is the same reason as to why I'm sharing this information with you. This is the information Shireen Abu Akleh died for. Shireen Abu Akleh knew very well that the Islam is lobbying the caliphate. I'm guessing in this context now, Shireen Abu Akleh was the division between true Muslims and the terroristic money laundering caliphate. And she probably understood very well with the information that she had that the whole of Islam, including the loving Muslims, were about to be mounted by this Eastern propaganda. And when I say Eastern propaganda, I am mainly talking to the Muslim population, because the propaganda of the regimes that are being funded by the caliphate is convincing Muslims that democracy does not work. All right. And it is convincing Muslims to forcibly come back to Islam because of the nature of their race. But the funny part is, if they are coercing Muslims to come back to Islam, they're coercing Indians to come back to Islam because of the nature of their race, why then is Islam allowing black Africans to be indoctrinated and to take part in Islam? All right, because when you move on towards the central parts of Africa, we find that the Africans who have been indoctrinated from a young birth into Islam stay true to what they call the caliphate. And the caliphate stems from a very historical knowledge of what we call the Moors who traded without using money, but were very true to their trading in what we call bartering. And with this being said, the caliphate holds very true to trading techniques of what we call bartering. And if we remember very well, trading techniques of what we call bartering are no so different from the trading techniques of when the white colonizers, the trading techniques of what the white colonizers used when they arrived in the harbors of Cape Town and KwaZulu-Natal. Hence, you found that they were able to move along the gulfs of the continents and use the same bartering techniques that the Moors used thousands of years ago. Right, so with this being said, the bartering and the backward, let me rather say the systematical backward bartering system is not democratic. All right, it is actually very much syndicate in nature. So syndicate in nature that a person who is anti-white superiority, like our communistic Julius Malema, leader of the EFF, has been fighting against the white superiority, would actually say that would actually fight democracy and say democracy was built on the syndicate that built on the shores and on the coasts of Southern Africa. The same syndicate that was able to move into the Witwatersrand and use the gold money that was taken from the prophets after using black people as the laborers of the mining industry. All right, so the same notions of the caliphate and of Islam are shared when speaking against democracy, of which now, in this context, democracy does not have a right in order to stop the colonizing of the Islam using the caliphate syndicate. All right, because those are the pillars of what democracy was built on as well. South African gold has been traveling around the world for hundreds of years. All right, Queen Elizabeth herself built quite a large portion of her monarchy on the gold that comes from Southern Africa as well. All right, so unfortunately, as much as I wanted to withhold this content, it is very important for all these governing systems and all these governors and leaders to understand that the reason why this information is coming out, it is simply because we want them to understand that the corruption that is failing to run this world needs to stop. And there is a large segment of the world population that is against the syndicate that was formed on the foundation of COVID-19 that is currently running this world now. Okay, right, moving on. The classification of these factions that altogether bring about the Middle East conflict and African conflict is democracy, it's a faction now, communism, democracy and communism. And I hate to say the fact that democracy and communism are now factions. The reason why I say that democracy and communism are now factions of governance instead of styles, it's because democracy, because of the foundation of the syndicate that is now running the world after COVID-19, is built on syndicate money. And communism as well share exactly, you could say they are in the same WhatsApp group. All right. So what I would have liked to thought that the Democratic leaders, such as your Joe Biden, currently very much now, Joe Biden, Jinping, Vladimir Putin, Cyril Ramaphosa, what the entities in that gang who I would have alluded, who come from democratic countries and who I would have liked to call, or who I would have liked to say they have honest money. Unfortunately, they do not have honest money because the deaths that built the politics that are currently running the world of the coronavirus pandemic and COVID-19 international lockdown comes from syndicate money. Okay, now let's just say these democracies are not using syndicate money. Then we could say that the democracy uses non-terroristic money and the communism uses terroristic money. And terroristic money is syndicate money, and democracy, non-terroristic money, is the GDP profits. Okay, now let us move on. Right. With all of that being said, staying true to my topic, the following regimes run on terroristic money: ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, Al-Wada, and the Taliban. Okay, these are terroristic regimes that are under the Islam Taliban flag. And this Islam Taliban flag triumphantly, without fear, announces that democracy is a belief and a religion for non-Muslims. Okay, now altogether these regimes or gangs make up the caliphate and the African caliphate. So as we have found, when we go back to the politics in Syria, we know that ISIS has taken territory in Syria. And we know that ISIS is the baby of the Al-Qaeda. ISIS felt that Al-Qaeda was moving a bit too slow in the lobbying of this caliphate. And with ISIS taking on this notion, it was managed to cover quite a significant amount of territory in the east. Unfortunately, Al-Qaeda did not die. Al-Qaeda, moving at a very tortoise pace, managed to move towards northern Africa. And when it moved towards northern Africa, it was able to indoctrinate quite a lot of suffering Africans into Islam. And by doing that, Islam was able to move along with the Al-Qaeda towards Central Africa as well. So in a sense, one could, because of the lack of consistent media coverage, one can start to wonder which one is moving faster. Is it the camp from the ISIS Middle East region, or is it the camp from the Al-Qaeda from the Central Africa region. But it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, both camps come together to form what we call the Islam caliphate. All right. The caliphate wants no democracy, no communism either, but just Islam. And the constitution of that Islam is the Quran, like I mentioned earlier on, which is facilitated and forced, which facilitated and forced indoctrination is moderated by the Taliban and the caliphate. So in a sense, the Taliban says that once you have sworn pledge to Islam, you are under the militant Taliban. And when you are under the militant Taliban, you are politically locked within this Taliban. So which means the same Taliban that protects you is the same Taliban that imprisons you. And as much as you would think that it is this Taliban that is in charge, with a higher cognizance of the order, it is actually the caliphate that is in charge. And the caliphate owes its true origins to the existence of what Islam exists for. Right. These terrorist groups have an official country, and that is Afghanistan. Do you remember the MPE that I told you about? This is what the caliphate is lobbying on top of. The modern political era from 2001, 9/11. Okay, which was the attack on the American World Trade Center Twin Towers. Okay, currently Al-Qaeda is attempting to take full territory in northern and central Africa. Right. This is not a physical war. As much as I can see I can see you guys in America. I can see you guys in NATO as well. And I can see you guys thinking you have this whole thing figured out. But this is not a physical war. I can see NATO preparing allies that are concentrated around arms. I can see America trying their best to catch all the falling parts, of their administrative political system that they had around the world. I can see a whole lot of people a whole lot of leaders running around trying to understand what's going on around the world. But I mean, the true reality of the nature is this is not a physical war. This is a systematical war that leads to the exchange of firepower. All right. Now, when I say systematical war, in my previous video, I spoke about social influence, right? The social influence of the caliphate. Right, the social influence of the caliphate holds its pillar and its roots, and it's anchored on the westernized Muslim population. The westernized Muslim population has been coerced to understand the Western white people to such an extent that they have children with them. And when they finally have children with them, obviously, if it's the male counterpart having a child with a white female counterpart, the female takes onto the religion of the male counterpart, and once that has happened, because the male counterpart understands the dialects of the Islam Muslim religion, he leads the family, or he leads the household in the political sense. And obviously, if he leads a household in a political sense, well, the Quran religion doesn't allow for a woman to participate in politics. The white woman ends up no being different than the Indian women who are being oppressed by the Taliban in the Afghanistan. On a more lighter tone, with a lighter undertone, the Black Americans, for example, the westernized Black Americans who are now friends with westernized Indians, are convinced and they are coerced to be against the white colony system, using plantation politics to convince Black Americans towards Islam, using the Black slavery politics that happened 400 years ago to convince Black Americans into Islam. Further, long ago, Black Americans were so concentrated on finding their roots. Even Oprah went and found her Zulu name, which is Thandi. Where does Oprah find her Zulu name? Where is Thandi? God knows. I have no idea. But the brainwash is no different as to compared to Oprah changing her name to Thandi. So soon, just to give it, I'm sorry to mention your name, Oprah, but I just want the world to understand what is currently happening in the world right now. I just don't want you, Oprah Winfrey, to change your name to Muhammad. Okay, moving over. As I was saying, so the Black American is now friends with a westernized Muslim Indian, and the Black American is against the plantation is against the plantation politics, and not against the plantation politics, but he is showing anti-democratic government styles because of plantation politics. And the Islam friend is also doing the exact same, but lobbying a new religion to replace Christianity. All right. Now, moving on. The caliphate that has organized themselves within Western colonial establishments have a telephonical system of spying operation through watching prominent democratic Western leaders through hacking their accounts and social media accounts as well. All right, before I deliberate on that, I spoke about the Black American who is being convinced into Islam because of historical slavery plantation politics. Excuse me. Okay. We had a psychological pandemic around the world. I don't know if any one of you remember any of this, but Black Lives Matter is a caliphate Islam lobby. All right. Black Lives Matter is a stance against non-performing democratic leaders, just like Joe Biden. So, as I said, as much as we are all preparing firepower, nuclear arms, and so forth, we need to understand that the indoctrination is what takes center stage here. All right. I am concerned about the seasoned leader that America has right now, as compared to the hothead Donald Trump that we had. Donald Trump was able to make peace with North Korea, shake hands with North Korea, and Donald Trump was able to fight for the children who were attacked by chemical warfare in Syria. The adoption of these Syrian politics by Joe Biden is making it seem as though America is funding ISIS. Right. Moving on. as I said, the caliphate that has organized themselves within Western colonial establishments have a telephonical system of a spying operation through watching prominent democratic Western leaders through hacking their accounts and social media accounts. What is the importance of this point? Coercion. Each and every single step that democratic leaders or leaders of the democratic nations take could be, one can question if it's steps or if it's decisions that they want to take themselves as leaders who are in charge of their own democratic government, or it is decisions that they make through coercion. Okay, and decisions made through preventing are decisions made by coercion. All right, NATO is a coercion against the East. Joe Biden is a coercion against the West. How is Joe Biden a coercion against the West? He is not firing the East. He is not preparing an armed attack against the stance that China is doing. China is polishing their weapons. China is allowing their soldiers to come out and walk in the park and bathe in vitamin D. Meanwhile, NATO is still trying their best to convince Joe Biden to understand the true reality and nature of the politics. The current relationship that Joe Biden has with Israel is currently very scary because the Palestinians are not happy with this relationship. And if the Palestinians are not happy with this relationship, it clearly proves that the Palestinians are not in the Islam caliphate lobby. All right. Moving on. The evidence of this is poor customer service and rebellious organizational behavior from employees. I know for a fact that the general white businessmen who are employing who have black employees have been having psychological behavioral problems within their establishments. This stems from the friendship between the Black American and the Muslim friend who are lobbying, who are chasing away Christianity from westernized blacks and replacing it with Islam. All right. So in a sense, not in a sense, but systematically, this lack of poor service is an attack. It's purposeful. It is on purpose. It is an attack on the ongoing running and establishments of white-owned businesses that are to be politically taken siege by this psychological behavioral problem in order to instill fear on these white bosses, so that these white bosses are afraid to reprimand their black employees, because the black employees are going to cry wolf using Islam religion. Okay. The true hardcore fact is that the two enemies of the terroristic caliphate is democracy and English, so that the world can be lawless and run by these syndicates and not the actual Islam. Okay. The guilt trip here on the West and on the democracy is that democracy was built on the same syndicates that are being run by Western drill bits. So, in a sense, what is killing the West are drill bits. What is killing the West are those who do not want to lobby or who do not want to finally conform to electric cars, who do not want to finally conform to renewable energy, who do not want to bow down our all high, so mighty Elon Musk. We have a big problem with that. Right now, we are fighting climate change. The caliphate is not fighting climate change. Joe Biden, you are fighting climate change. And if you are fighting climate change and you are still funding, you are still sending money towards the East, then you are a drill bit. And if you are a drill bit, that is not the sort of precedent that we want for our American country. And we are holding our American country so high up because they have the pillar of world administration. I am talking to you now because of the example of world administration. And if you cannot restrict, or if you cannot restrain or withhold our democratic leader, Cyril Ramaphosa, who's currently running around with all these communistic warlord leaders, then clearly you are in cahoots with them. Sorry for that accusation. All right. So moving on, hence democracies around the world should be uniting to protect democracy and English, and in turn protect the United States of America, which is hardest hit through international administration. The diversion and the coercion is for American leaders not to concentrate on their campaigns, on their democratic campaigns. Instead, use their arrogance that they have a history of world administration and create more and more and more and more and more problems until they run flat out of energy. And by that, I mean, look, the Americas have been trying their best to impress the world by maintaining world peace. Hence, the United Nations. The United Nations is being attacked. Who was the leader of the United Nations? Who was once the president of the World Health Organization? And if that leader does not stem from a source of an Indian race background, then you can tell me to shut up right now, because we know exactly that these leaders have been in Islam, from an Islam religion, and by default from a caliphate. Like I said, the pandemic, the coronavirus pandemic and the COVID-19 international lockdown has been in favor for Islam and has been in favor of Muslims. Well, not all Muslims, but the syndicate Muslims and the caliphate. All right. Employment through crime. Right. Now, I'm going to park and camp on this one a bit, because that is the current problem that we are currently facing. All over the world, there's this new golf course sport that's taking place. And this golf course sport it's clubs against the decapitated heads of women. Your nine-iron, your call it whatnot. I don't play golf. I'm not a posse. But the current sport around the world that is preventing big democracies like America and big democracies like Canada from creating and allowing leaders like me and kings like me to lobby world peace is this sport of nine-ironers and golf clubs against the decapitated heads of women. White woman, black woman, African woman, Indian woman. This human trafficking syndicate that the caliphate is running is destroying our planet.